The frontal stance in Wing Chun Kung Fu is traditionally known or traditionally called the Yi Ji Kim Young Ma in Cantonese. And basically this means the character 2 goat clamping stance. Now what character 2 means, it means the Chinese character 2, which is comprised of a short bar on top and a longer parallel bar on the bottom. And the reason why they call it this is because the position of your feet, if you were to connect the two dots between the toes and the dots between the heels, you would have one short line and one longer line here, which looks like the Chinese number 2. But also if you look at the stance from the front and you connect the knees with one line and you connect the feet with one line, you would have a longer parallel line of the feet, a shorter one at the knees, which also looks like the character 2. So the Chinese often use their writing system to show people how things are supposed to look like. So if something is supposed to look like a cross, they will call it a character 10 because the Chinese character for 10 is actually a cross. So they often use this kind of convention to explain things. So when you set the frontal stance, which we normally use in the formal training for the form, for chi sao drills and so on, we don't necessarily use it in actual combat. We would set it like this. We bring our hands straight up to the side, then you're going to bend the knees. You should bend the knees far enough that you can no longer see your feet if you were to look down. Then you're going to rotate, not out the hips and not from the knees and not from the feet, but from the hips. They're going to rotate out like this. We're keeping your heels together at least 60 degrees or 45 degrees, depending on your level of hip flexibility. Then from there, you're going to take the toes as pivots, and you're going to use the hips to bring the knees in like this, okay? Once you've done this, all that's left to do is to tilt your pelvis slightly forward. It's very important not to exaggerate this. Some Wing Chun people tilt the pelvis so far forward that their upper body starts to lean back. We, of course, want to avoid this. One of the ideas in the frontal stance is to keep your posture absolutely upright, as if someone is pulling your spine up from the end. And this can't be achieved if you're slouching backwards like this. So while the hips are forward, you want to keep the waist tucked in and your posture absolutely straight. While your knees are kind of pulling towards each other, especially if you're a beginner, you're going to feel after a while that your legs are going to shake. This is totally normal. This is part of the Kung Fu training. This is part of your basic stance training. So while you're practicing the Yun Tao form, while you're practicing your basic drills and chi sao and all this kind of stuff, you're going to feel it a little bit. The more you practice, the easier it'll get. But when you're practicing this stance, try to really practice it in a concentrated way. Don't allow yourself to kind of slack up. When you're doing anything, punching, moving, whatever, it's very important to keep this midsection here stable. When you watch a lot of people punch, you'll often see that the midsection will kind of start to rock and move like this, and that's a lack of stability. What we want to do is we want to keep the glutes tight, the hips slightly forward, everything in here tight, so when you're punching, when you're moving, when you're doing chi sao, this should be relatively stable. Only when I turn, only when I step forward am I actually going to move my stance. But while I'm in this stance here, no matter how I'm moving my upper body, this should be relatively stable, at least at first. The more advanced you become, the more we kind of take these training wheels off. But very important when you practice, keep it very solid, keep it very stable, all right? For practical fighting, you can be much more relaxed, much more mobile. It's not necessary to train your knee pressure in front of your opponent, all right? When you're fighting, you need mobility. When you're training, we need to train stability.